The severe climate conditions experienced on a global level are leaving many asking what we can do to mitigate the associated risks and impact of climate change. Good day and welcome to this Focus On with me, Dewald Rademeyer. Extreme weather conditions have had a devastating impact on the South African economy, from the agri-sector all the way to damaging our lives and livelihoods. Professor Debra Roberts, climate science expert and South Africa's candidate for the chair of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or IPCC, and also the first woman from Africa to be nominated to lead the IPCC, joins me now to shed some light on this matter. What's the global perspective as to what our climate conditions are like?
Well, thanks very much for this opportunity to talk to you. I'm currently at this event talking about the findings of the recent Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change's reports. And they indicate that we live in a much warmer world. We are already experiencing a world which is warmed by 1.15 degrees Celsius. And that warming has impacted all parts of the planetary system, the atmosphere, the oceans, the frozen parts of the world, and the living parts, with negative impacts across all sectors. We're seeing acute food insecurity. We're seeing water scarcity. We're seeing declines in agricultural productivity, with the most severe declines having occurred in Africa. We're seeing our infrastructure under threat. We're seeing health impacts from mental health to the spread of diseases, and negative impacts on biodiversity. So we live in a world which is becoming increasingly dangerous, but where these challenges are exacerbated by inequity and unsustainability in our society.
Now, this conversation comes at a opportune moment now, because for the past few years we've seen extreme floods. We've got tornadoes. I mean, Western Cape went from droughts through to floods. Gauteng, we've experienced some unusual rains. What policies can we put into place to help protect us from these climate conditions?
Well, the IPCC doesn't recommend policies. The work of the IPCC is to remain policy relevant, but not policy prescriptive. What we do is we look at the science and look at the options for response. And really what we talk about is the need for transformative change across all aspects of our society, across all aspects of our economy. And we talk about the need for key system transitions. So, for example, if you think about the energy system, the move to renewable energy. If you think about industrial systems, again, more sustainable processes, urban systems, better land use planning, the retrofitting of buildings and the creation of green buildings, the need to protect 30 to 50% of the natural systems in the earth, to create social safety nets for the people who will be experiencing the impact of the now inevitable losses and damages. So there's a whole portfolio of action which is clearly linked to enabling conditions like the need for finance and the need for technology transfer. So it's a vast basket of interventions that we need across all aspects of our society.
What path do you see us leading towards if we don't implement the necessary infrastructure, the necessary fundings to help us mitigate these climate conditions? Because we've been globally, you're either sitting with floods or you're sitting with droughts. What can we realistically do?
Well, as I say, I mean, the kind of interventions we've spoken about are important in responding to the climate change challenge, but the ultimate solution is ambitious mitigation. By 2035, we've got to have reduced emissions by 60% if we are interested in limiting global warming, so keeping it to 1.5 or well below 2 degrees Celsius. So that is the ultimate intervention, is weaning ourselves off this carbon-intensive form of development that has been the case since the Industrial Revolution, and moving to more sustainable energy sources in order to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, but also reducing other emissions that are non-carbon dioxide related, things like methane and nitrous oxide from our agricultural practices, from processes of land clearance. So that's really where the challenge lies. If we don't do that, and currently if we look at policies that are on the books, if we keep doing only what we're doing currently and we don't affect these massive changes in our energy systems, in our land use patterns, we could look at increasing global average temperatures by over 3 degrees by the end of the century.
on a different note, what is the science telling us, other than we need to manage our land and manage our water usage more properly?
Well, as I said, it's really about the fossil fuel use and the change in the energy system. That's the big driver of carbon dioxide production. Also, management of land. The more we clear forests, for example, creates a situation where carbon dioxide goes into the atmosphere. So it's really about that ambitious mitigation, which is absolutely critical, because that then reduces the level of warming, reduces the level of impacts, and gives us a fighting chance on the mitigation front. So it's all about the gases going into the atmosphere.
Do you think if the government has a set time they need to start implementing the actions needed to reduce our carbon footprint? If we say if we don't do it in the next couple of years, this is going to be the devastating effect afterwards.
Yeah, so I mean, what the science is saying is that we've got to see peak emissions by 2025 globally, which means emissions should already be decreasing. But we currently, NOAA's just released their latest figures. We're sitting here at 421 parts per million currently, so emissions are increasing, they're not decreasing. And as I said to the audience today, the big challenge is by 2035, global emissions need to have been reduced by 60%. So that's the kind of timeline that we're looking about. It's really this decade. That is the decade that makes the big changes. It's the time we need to make these ambitious changes to our energy systems, to our infrastructural systems, to our land use patterns.
And I'm going to make a false assumption here, but I'm assuming big corporates or big industrial areas are the main contributor to the carbon footprint.
It's the energy system and the people who use and consume that. So it's industry, it's transport, it's the building and infrastructure sector. We've also got emissions coming from the agricultural sector. So all sectors are currently responsible, and they vary in different parts of the world. So obviously the emissions profile in Sudan is going to be very different to the emissions profile, for example, in somewhere in the northern hemisphere.
Thank you, Professor. And that was Professor Roberts, climate science expert and South Africa's candidate for the chair of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, who joins us to unpack more on this. That's it for today. Until next time, goodbye.